Spain's 1-0 win over Uruguay was not a classic, but it was a very interesting tactical game. Spain controlled the majority of possession, limited Uruguay to very few attacking moments, and did enough to secure the result they needed in their final World Cup group stage game. But this was not a performance that completely removed doubts about Spain, because while their control was impressive, their final third threat was still slightly concerning. Uruguay, despite everything going on around them off the pitch, pressed with aggression, competed with intensity, and made Spain work extremely hard to create clear chances. So this was a game that showed both sides of Spain, their ability to dominate territory and manage risk, but also their continued lack of runners in behind, lack of box presence, and an over-reliance on technical combinations in front of the opposition. Uruguay had very few sustained attacks in this game. Spain controlled the ball for long periods, and Uruguay's main attacking route was usually direct. When they did build from the back, Uruguay used a very wide back four, with the midfield three quite separated from each other, and the idea was to create larger gaps in Spain's pressing structure. Spain pressed with a piston mechanism between Oyarzabal and Merino. One would press the centre-back in his vertical lane, while the other dropped onto Ugarte. Behind them, Spain's back four remained in place, giving them a +1 against Uruguay's narrow front three. This meant Spain could press without losing control of their defensive line. Uruguay rarely wanted to play through the middle anyway, and instead, they often went long. The problem was that the quality of those long balls was poor, and Spain dealt with them well. As a result, many of Uruguay's attacks broke down before they could even properly begin. But when Uruguay did manage to hold onto the ball, there was a clear idea. They looked to overload the wide areas quickly through vertical movements between the winger, fullback, and midfielder on that side. On the right, Bentancur would overlap Cannobio from midfield. On the left, Sanabria would overlap Araujo, partly because Yamal did not always track him with full intensity. These movements did create some crossing opportunities, but this is where Uruguay's final action let them down. Darwin Núñez found himself in a few promising situations, but either arrived a yard too late or failed to make clean contact. So Uruguay had moments where they could threaten Spain, but not enough quality to punish them. The more interesting part of the game came when Spain had possession. Despite Uruguay's struggles and off-the-pitch issues, there was no sign of the players downing tools. Their pressing was aggressive, committed, and at times very effective. Núñez positioned himself between Spain's centre-backs, blocking the passing lane between them. However, this came with a risk. Both Cabassi and Laporte were comfortable carrying the ball forward into midfield. Because Uruguay's midfield was so man-oriented, lines opened for Spain's centre-backs to drive into. Valverde pressed Rodri, Bentancur pressed Pedri, Ugarte pressed Moreno, so when the centre-backs had time and space to step forward, Uruguay's midfielders were often forced into difficult decisions. Did they stay with their man, or did they jump to the centre-back? Spain tried to use this to create access into Rodri. One of Cabassi or Laporte would carry forward, which would drag Valverde away from Rodri. Then the centre-back could bounce the pass into the number 8 in front of him, who would quickly lay it off inside to Rodri. Now Rodri was free because Valverde had been distracted by the centre-back's forward run. These were very clever mechanisms, but Spain didn't create enough from them. Spain's direction of travel was mostly down the left. Llorente stayed much deeper on the right, with Araujo close to him, while Cucurella moved higher on the left. Cannobio tracked Cucurella wherever he went. This allowed Varela to follow Baena inside, pressing him whenever he dropped deeper to receive. At times, Spain flipped the structure slightly. Cucurella would advance into the half space, while Baena stayed wide. That meant when Baena received, he could face inside and act as a playmaker from the left. To keep the 2-3-5 structure behind the attack, Rodri or Pedri could move out from the centre into the left-back position. Uruguay's markers usually tried to stay with them, but occasionally Cannobio would react aggressively and press high up that side. His intensity was impressive, he snapped into challenges and tried to disrupt Spain's rhythm, but that same aggression also came with a cost, eventually leading to his red card. One of Spain's main problems was the lack of depth from the striker position. Oyarzabal's profile means he naturally wants to drop deeper and connect play rather than constantly running behind. When space opened in midfield, he would move towards the ball and try to link possession. But Uruguay handled this well. The centre-backs shared responsibility for him, and Caceres tracked him when he dropped. That meant Oyarzabal rarely received in the kind of space where he could turn and hurt Uruguay. And because he was not consistently threatening him behind, Uruguay's defensive line could stay comfortable. This is a recurring issue for Spain. They can dominate possession, they can create angles, they can control territory, but they do not always have enough players attacking the spaces behind the defence. Too many players want the ball to feet. Baena wanted the ball to feet. Merino did not offer enough box-crashing presence. Oyarzabal was contained, so Spain's possession often happened in front of Uruguay rather than behind them. The player who did offer something different was Lamine Yamal. He gave Spain genuine depth and 1-versus-1 threat. Whenever he received, there was always the possibility that he could beat a defender and create something from nothing. But Uruguay reacted quickly and aggressively. If the ball went to Yamal, Araujo would move across from Llorente to engage him. Then Oliveira would come across from the left centre-back. Suddenly, Yamal was facing 2 or 3 defenders. Yamal is outstanding, but 3 versus 1 is almost impossible. The issue for Spain was that Llorente did not overlap enough to support him, and even when he did, Araujo was often already positioned deep enough to block the space, so Uruguay were able to commit numbers to Yamal without being seriously punished elsewhere. Spain had their best individual threat, but they did not always create the conditions for him to isolate defenders properly. And this is what made the performance slightly strange. Spain were clearly the better team, they controlled the territory, they limited Uruguay's attacking threat, they found ways to progress past the first line, but once they reached the final third, everything became more difficult. There was not enough depth, not enough underlapping movement, not enough box crashing, and not enough physical presence inside the penalty area, and not enough support around Yamal when he became the obvious 1 versus 1 threat. Spain got the job done, and in tournament football, that matters. But if we are analysing them as potential World Cup winners, the same question remains that it did in my preview video, and that it also did in my Cape Verde video. Can they turn control into clear chances consistently enough against better defensive blocks? In this game, they did just enough, but only just. This was not a statement performance, it was a tournament performance. A game they managed, suffered through when needed, and ultimately won. But if Spain want to go all the way, they may still need to find more threat in the final third.